Hello everyone, it's Jin'taan here and welcome to another episode of Viewers Questions, which, as the name implies, is where I answer questions from you, the viewers. So if you'd be interested in having your questions about myself or the game in general answered in another video, feel free to leave them in the comments below and I will look through them for next time. Anyway, today we're going to be answering a question from Atil Thor Jonsson. Sorry if I mispronounced your name there, I don't know how to read Icelandic characters properly. And he asks, given how oppressive Blops-type ships have become in non-super protected areas of Null since the blackout, do you think it requires balancing, and how would you balance that? And I wanted to take a look at this question because, whilst it does start with the preposition that, Cloaky ships might be overpowered, I think what it implies and what it touches upon here is by far the more interesting part of the question, which is the general perception that ships that are hunting PvE ships are now more powerful against sub-capital targets than they were in the past, whereas that hasn't really been the case for capital targets. And whilst that's obviously something that I struggle to conclusively prove with the data that I have access to, it does seem to be the case just looking at the MER that regions which have traditionally had super umbrellas have been relatively unaffected by the changes, whereas the regions outside of that have been a lot more heavily affected in terms of their ability to make money. And I think that what we're seeing here is effectively the reverse application of Mal'Canis's law, which is, for those who aren't familiar, Mal'Canis's law says that anything you do to help new players will help veteran players infinitely more because they'll have more resources to take advantage of the change. And when I say reverse Mal'Canis law, what I mean by that is that any change intended to hurt veterans will hurt new players significantly more because veterans have the resources to adjust for the changes, whereas newer players don't. Anyway, getting back to the core of the question, which is about how overpowered Cloaky hunters are supposedly in this current meta, I do have to kind of disagree with the idea that they are fundamentally just overpowered. I think the problem actually comes in with the informational advantage that a hunter will always have over its prey. If you are in a Cloaky Loki, you are going to be able to choose to only engage the things that you can kill because you know what the optimal fits are of every ship that you're flying against. Because, EVE is a very, very optimized game, and that means that the PvE fits tend to be quite optimized as well. And what that means is that you can just bring a hard counter to that specific fit and then never fight anything else. And that is what a lot of people do with their Cloaky hunters. And that is really where I expect that a lot of the dislike for the gameplay of Cloaky hunters comes in, because there is effectively no way to force a fight with them on your own terms, and that's the design of the Cloaky Loki in the first place. It's designed to just get you a fight on your terms so that you can either kill something or leave. And I don't think that that is, in function, a terrible idea. However, the idea of that then being a endless and untrackable threat does have a very damping effect on people wanting to go out and PvE or even PvP in some instances. And the reason for that, in my opinion, is what I have to call the illusion of risk. Basically the idea that when you're in space, there could be a Cloaky Loki or a Cloaky Proteus anywhere in space, and you wouldn't know about it. And whilst I'm all for adding, kind of risks to the game, I think what the game needs to try and provide to you is less the illusion of risk and more the illusion of safety. You want people to go out in space and think it's safe and then die. You don't want to leave them in this intel wasteland where they won't know where's safe, so they'll assume nowhere's safe, so they just won't undock. Which is effectively just what we're seeing during the current blackout. People in regions that don't have some way of giving them that illusion of safety are simply not seeing the same levels of activity that we saw before the blackout. That's an indisputable fact at this point. Now, whether you think that slowdown of activity in nullsec is a good thing or a bad thing is probably going to depend on your own personal views on the game. So, let me know in the comments if you're happy about that or sad about that. But what I really think is important is that I don't think the hulls here are the problem. If you nerfed the Loki, you wouldn't not have the Legion or the Tengu come in to take its place. You wouldn't have the Proteus come in to take its place, but that's because the Proteus is really goddamn bad right now, which sucks because it's one of my favourite ships. Please buff. But anyway, there are a few things that you could really do to try and shake up the PvE hunting metagame, and I think the biggest one is one that CCP will probably never be able to do, and that's making it so that anomalies, or at least PvE and nullsec, can be attacked from multiple different angles, and you're not just stuck with, whatever drone ship is best, which has been the ratting meta for about 6-7 years now. It feels like that long. Basically, since the big drone rebalance, drones have just been the automatic go-to choice for ratting, and that means that you only have to deal with one set of weapons when you're trying to craft a cloaky hunting ship, and that makes cloaky hunting ships more powerful because they only need to bring countermeasures for one particular thing. But moving away from more grand pie-in-the-sky ideas, I think you can look at smaller changes that would still probably help increase that illusion of safety. And when I say illusion of safety, I don't mean that there is fake safety. I mean that people feel like they have enough intel to make a rational choice between how much risk that they want to take. Local allowed people to fully understand exactly what risks they were taking at all times, and that was bad. I don't think that was healthy for the game, but I think we're in the opposite extreme of the spectrum right now, and people don't know if they're camped, they don't know if there's any cloaky people in system. There's a myriad of things that they have to worry about, including stuff like cloaky sinos. So you can understand why people are reacting in the way that they are. And you can especially understand a lot of the negativity towards it, because people aren't getting to play the game that they pay for. And I don't think that that's salt. I think that that's a fairly, normal reaction for people to have. Now, right when the blackout was announced, we actually had a lot of people kind of white knighting CCP, I guess, by talking about the fact that, obviously observatories are coming, and this is part of some grand plan, and soon players are going to control all of the intel in the game. And that didn't come to pass, quite predictably. But I do think that the ideas that were had behind that were actually pretty good. Having a delayed local as opposed to a flat-out non-existent local is a lot better for both sides in a way. Because with that delayed local, like if you have 2 to 3 minutes to go in, you can do whatever you want, no one's going to know you're in that system, or if you've moved to the other systems. That gives you this window to go in and attack someone without them knowing they're even being attacked if you're fast enough. And that, I think, is something that could be really interesting as a small gang. But conversely, it also means that as a player, a PvE player, you can know that you're not going to be camped. You know that there's not going to be someone sitting cloaked in your anomaly waiting for you to kill you. And I'm sure some people are going to say, hey, I should be able to do that, and that's totally fine, but there's got to be some differences between wormholes and nullsec, at least in my opinion, and I feel like local is a decent percentage of that. I feel like having a good understanding of the risks that you're taking is an important part of how nullsec is played out, even if people don't like the state that it's currently in as a result of that. Alternatively, I could see there being good solutions in providing better tools for defensive players to actually hunt cloaky hunters, because that would encourage them to undock and engage in a different style of gameplay, but it would still give them gameplay to engage with. Whereas right now, if a cloaky hunter thinks that they're being hunted, they just cloak up and they can safe log. Adding a way to decloak them more aggressively would probably help there by making people feel like they really do have agency within the game, but that's again speculation, and also something that could have impacts on gameplay outside of that specific frame, and that's always something that I'm a little hesitant of, especially after October of 2018 with the whole rush hick changes and how that impacted wormholes. And even as a complicated game, sometimes you just can't change one or two things and have those be changed in isolation. Alright, so just to drag this rambling rant, kicking and screaming back onto the topic of the original question, Do I think that Cloaky hunters require balancing? Yes, but not in the sense of the ships or even the playstyle. I think some of the mechanics around it are the problem, and the lack of generally feeling like you have agency as a player to avoid it is where the issues come in, rather than in the fact that their ganks are powerful and normally going to kill you. I think that's pretty much always the way it's going to be, unless there are some massive, massive changes to how PvE works in the game, as in it basically being a simulated PvP encounter, which I don't think is something they'll ever go for. I mean, hell, since the blackout started, we've seen on average 300 and a bit more Lokis die a month, as a result of more people trying to use them that just aren't very good with them, or at least that would be my interpretation of the stats. Anyway, Atlee, I hope that that answers your question, at least as well as I'm ever going to. I've never been a huge fan of either Cloaky hunting or PvE, so I can't say that I'm, doing it every day or anything like that. But you're here to hear my opinion, so thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed it. A special thanks for supporting this episode goes out to our Crassus, Pinche Infidel, as well as to our other $5 patrons in Dustin Prater, Meeks, and Czar, as well as to everyone else who contributes to the Patreon, which helps keep the show running. Have a wonderful day, and as always, fly smart.